All right, welcome to the live stream. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to factor some trinomials, and I'm going to use the technique of slide and divide for some of these, show you how to do it. All right, so first off, let's go to here, and I have 7x squared minus 8x plus 1. So now with slide and divide, this is the slide part right here. So what you're going to do is you're going to multiply the 7 times the 1, so it becomes x squared minus 8x plus 7. And you're going to factor it the normal way you would factor it. Two values multiplied together equals 7, but when I add them together, I get negative 8 for the middle term. So the two factors of x would be x minus 1 times x minus 7. So that would be that factored. Now, the number that you slid, so we slid the 7. So what happens is we have to take that 7 and we have to divide it by this. Okay? So what happens is we get x minus 1/7, and that simplifies to 7x minus 1. And you can do that by taking the denominator and just multiplying it by that. All right? And then this simplifies to x minus 1, and then we can check our answer. We would get 7x squared for the first. Outers would be minus 7x. Inners would be minus x, and last term would be plus 1, which is 7x squared minus 8x plus 1. All right, so that would be the first one with slide and divide. All right, problem 2. This is a 1 here, so we don't have to slide and divide this. We just need to find two factors multiply together that give us negative 24. But when I add them together, I get negative 5. And so in this case here, if we had negative 8 times 3, that equals negative 24. And negative 8 plus 3 equals negative 5. So that means our factors are x minus 8 times x plus 3 in this case here. Okay? All right, so number 3, again, we're going to use slide and divide when this initial term in front of the squared is not a 1, so it's a 2. So we're going to do slide and divide here. So the slide part is you're going to take that 2 and you're going to multiply it by the 3, so that'll leave us with a 1 out front. So we slid that 2 over to the 3 by multiplying. Okay, so then we get x squared plus 7x plus 6. Now I'm going to factor this like I would normally factor. So 6 is 3 times, well, actually 6 is 6 times 1 because we need the middle term to be 7. So this would be x plus 6 times x plus 1. Now, since we slid the 2, we got to put it divided by 2 here. We got to put it divided by 2 here. This simplifies to x plus 3. And then this, x plus a half, is the same thing. Take that 2 and multiply it by x. So you get 2x plus 1 would be our answer. Okay? All right. So let's try the next one. Let's try problem 4. Do we need to use slide and divide here in problem 4? And the answer is no, because we have a 1x squared, so we don't have to slide. So we need factors. Two numbers multiplied together give us negative 50, but when I add them together, I get positive 5. Well, 10 times negative 5 is negative 50, and 10 plus negative 5 is equal to positive 5. So that means I'm going to use 10 and negative 5. So I've got x plus 10 times x minus 5 as my answer. Okay, so no slide and divided needed because the squared term had a 1 out front. All right. Okay, so next one, we have a 5 out front. All right, so what do we do with a 5? Well, with the 5, again, this is a slide and divide because we have a 5 instead of a 1, so I have to multiply that 5 by 3. So I would get x squared minus 16x, and then 5 times 3 is positive 15. All right? So two numbers multiplied together give me 15, but when I add them together, I get negative 16. Well, if I have minus 15 times negative 1, that equals positive 15. And if I have negative 15 plus negative 1, when I add them together, I get negative 16. So I want to use x minus 15 times x minus 1. But we have to remember we slid the 5, so we have to account for that by putting a divided by 5 after the constant. Simplify this. 15 divided by 3, 15 divided by 5 is 3. So I get x minus 3. Now, if you have a fraction here, to simplify this, just multiply it by the x, the denominator, so I get 5x minus 1 as my answer. All right? Okay, so next one, problem 6. I've got x squared plus 3x plus 2. Do I need slide and divide here? Well, I do not need slide and divide because my x squared has a 1 out front. So I'm ready just to factor this. Two numbers multiplied together give us 2, but when I add them, I get positive 3. So 2 times 1 is equal to 2, and 2 plus 1 is equal to 3. So this would be x plus 2 times x plus 1. No slide and divide needed here. All right. Okay, next problem. Again, slide and divide it, not needed because I have x squared, 1x squared here. So I need two numbers multiplied together, give me 40. But when I add them together, I get positive 13. So it looks like 8 times 5 would work. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 plus 5 is 13. So I would get x plus 8 times x plus 5 for this being factor. All right. Okay, problem 8. X squared minus 17x plus 42. Again, we have a 1 out front, so normal factoring here. 42, factors of 42. So what are factors of 42? So we have 6 times 7 is 42, but that doesn't equal negative 17. So 6 times 7 doesn't work. All right, so we can't use 6 times 7. Okay, what are other factors of 42? Well, we have 21 times 2. That equals 42, but 21, we're not going to be able to add them together to get our middle term, negative 17. Well, one thing I notice is that 42, if you add 4 and 2 together, you get 6, which is divisible by 3. So that means 42 is divisible by 3. So 42 divided by 3 would be 14. And that's the combination that we're going to need here. So if I go negative 14 times negative 3, I get 42. But if I go negative 14 plus negative 3, I get negative 17. So that means that this factored would be x plus 14 times, I'm sorry, x minus 14 times x minus 3 as my answer. Okay. All right. Very good. So let's go on to the next problem. I hope this is helping anybody that has trouble factoring. Um, please leave some comments or, yeah, leave a like is great too. I just want to help you guys out. Okay, next we have 6x squared minus x minus 12. So this will definitely be slide and divide. So we're going to have to take our 6 and multiply it by negative 12. So the 6 is out of there now, so we get x squared minus x. 6 times negative 12 is negative 72. Right, so now we're going to factor this with our normal method where we're going to have to get factors of uh, two numbers multiplied together give us negative 72, but when I add them together give me negative 1. So in this case here, if I did negative 9 times 8, I would get negative 72, but if I did negative 9 plus 8, I would get negative 1. So that means we have x minus 9 times x plus 8, but don't forget that you slid the 6, so we have to take that 6 and we have to divide in here. Okay, now this one's a little bit different because we're going to have to simplify this. So one thing we can do is we can reduce this. So this would be x minus 3 halves when you divide by 3, and then this would be x plus 4/3 when you divide top and bottom of that by 2, that fraction. Okay, so now what can we do with this? Well, now you can take the 2 and multiply it by the x. So we would get 2x minus 3, and then we're going to take the 3 and multiply it by the x. We get 3x plus 4. Let's just double check this one to make sure it worked out. So first terms, we'd get 6x squared. Outer terms, we would get 8x. Inner terms, we would get negative 3 times 3x, which is negative 9x. And the last terms, we would get negative 12. So we would get 6x squared minus x minus 12. So that is correct. All right. Questions making sense? All right. Okay, so let's try the question with dividing. Okay, you have a question with why I'm dividing at the end there. Um, so when I take that 6 out by sliding, oh, you're good? Okay. All right, so let's go on to the next one. We've got 3x squared plus 2x plus 5. Okay, so we're going to have to slide this. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15, so we get x squared plus 2x minus 15. All right, which makes it a little bit easier to factor now. We need two numbers multiplied together give us negative 15, but when I add them together, I get positive 2. So it looks like positive 5 and negative 3 is going to work. That would give me negative 15. And then if I add 5 plus negative 3, I would get positive 2. So 5 and negative 3 are my factors, so I'm going to go x plus 5 times x minus 3. But we slid out the 3, so we got to bring it back into this by dividing here by 3. All right, so 5/3, we don't want to leave it as x plus 5/3, so I'm going to simplify that. Take that 3, multiply it here, 3x plus 5, and then 3 divided by 3 is 1, so I get x minus 1. I'm just double checking doing that in my head. And yes, that is correct. Okay. Questions? Everybody's good? Okay. So let's go to the next one. Okay, so this is complete the greatest common factor factoring of this. All right, so what is the greatest common factor in number 11? Okay, so in number 11, let me get the pen here. Okay, so it looks like now we want to first look at the numbers. So they got a 3, they got a 9, and they got a 12. Well, the greatest common factor that they all have is going to be 3. All right, so I know I can bring out a 3. All right, now we're going to look at the x's. So there's an x cubed, an x to the first, and an x to the first. So we can bring out front the lowest power that I have with that variable. So I have an x to the first is the lowest power. So I'm going to bring out an x to the first. And the same thing with the y's. We have a y to the first, y squared, and a y. So I can bring out a y to the first there. Okay. So now what do I need to multiply by 3xy to get 12x cubed y? Well, I know I need a 4 because I need 3 times 4 to be 12. So what do I need to multiply by x to get x to the third? Well, by our law of exponents, we're saying x times x to what power equals x to the third. Well, we know that we have to add the exponents, so that means I'm going to need a x squared from law of exponents there. All right. Now, we need a y in the term, but we already factored out one y, so we don't need anything else with this because we're going to get that y when we multiply. So you can check this by multiplying this and you should get 12x cubed y. All right. Okay, to get the middle term, I'm going to take the minus. So I have a minus. Well, I already have a 3, but I have a 3 there, so that's good. My x's are the same, so that's good. The only thing I need is I need a y squared. So I'm going to have to multiply this by y to get me the middle term here. So if I take 3x times negative y, I would get negative 3xy squared. All right, now for my last term, I need to go from 3xy to 9xy. Well, the xy patterns are the same, so the only thing I need is a positive 3 here. Okay? All right, so greatest common factor, factoring. All right, let me see where we're at. Okay, I need to stream 6 more minutes here. Okay, so in the next one here, we're going to take xy squared plus 2x squared y. So we're going to see here what we have in common. So when I look at this, I see that there's a 1. Oops. There's a 1 because there's no number out front here and a 2. So I can't bring any of the numbers out front. Okay, because I need to bring out the greatest common factor. And the greatest common factor is 1 between these two constants here. So I can't bring anything out there. I have an x to the first power and an x squared. So I can bring out the x. Okay. Now what about the y's? I have a y squared and I have a y, so I can bring out the lowest powered variable. So the lowest power would be the y to the first power, so I can bring out a y. So I'm going to set up my parentheses here. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, what do I need to multiply by xy to get xy squared? Okay, so what do I need to multiply? So I need to take this. I already have an x, so the x is good. I have one y, so I'm going to need another y because y times y is y squared, which would get me that 2 there. All right. And then in this case, for the next one, I need the constant 2 because there's no 2 in here, so I'm going to need a 2 for sure. All right. And then I have an x, but I need an x squared. So that means I'm going to have to multiply by another x. And then I need 2x squared y, but I already have a y that I factored out. So that means when I multiply xy by 2x, I'm going to get my 2x squared y. So this would be my answer, factoring out the greatest common factor. Okay? All right, questions on that? All right, so what did we learn from this? In this case here, when we go back up, we learned slide and divide factor. Let me show you another way that you can factor these. So let's try a different method of factoring. Instead of slide and divide, let me show you factor by grouping, because it said I need to stream for 5 more minutes here, okay? So that'll give me 5 more minutes. So let's do the first one by factor by grouping instead, because some students actually like factor by grouping. I think slide and divide is the easiest method, but this is definitely another way that you can do this, factor by grouping. So what you want to do with factor by grouping is you want to convert this into 4 terms by splitting up the middle term. Okay, now how are you going to split up the middle term? So we're going to say I need 2 numbers that when I multiply them together, so you're going to take the first constant and the last constant, you're going to take 7 times 1. So I need 2 numbers multiplied together that equal 7, but when I add them together, I get -8. So those are going to be the 2 numbers you use to split up that -8x. So 7 times 1 is 7, and -7 plus, so -7 times -1 is 7, so that gives us the 7 that we need, and -7 plus -1 is -8. So I'm going to use -7 and -1 to split this up. So what we do with factor by grouping is we rewrite this as 4 terms. So we get 7x squared minus 7x minus x plus 1. All right? Now what you do is, I like to put a line right down the middle here. So we're going to split this. Okay? And we're going to factor the left side of the dashed line. So I'm going to factor out a 7x. So I would get x minus 1 when I factor out a 7x. All right? Now I need a common group on the other side, so I'm going to factor out a -1 from this side. So I would get negative times the quantity x minus 1. Now factor by grouping, what we're doing is we're looking for a common factor. Well, x minus 1 is a common factor, so we write down x minus 1. And then our next factor, so now remember this negative sign is the same thing as -1. So my next group is actually this here. We group this together as 7x minus 1. And we get the same answer we would get if we did slide and divide. Okay? So that's another method that you can possibly do this. All right, let's do one more. I'll show you with factor by grouping. So let's do number 3 with factor by grouping. Oh, I messed that up. All right, let me just erase this here. Okay, so factor by grouping, let's do 2x squared plus 7x plus 3. Okay, so factor by grouping. So I need 2 numbers multiplied together give me 6, but when I add them I get 7. So if we go 6 times 1 equals 6, 6 plus 1 equals 7. So I'm going to use 6 and 1 to split up the middle term. So I go 2x squared plus 6x plus 1x plus 3. So this is equivalent to this. I'm just using 2 terms in the middle here. Okay, so now I do my split. I split right down the middle. Now I'm going to factor out a 2x on this side. So I would get x plus 3. This one already has x plus 3, so I'm going to call this 1 times x plus 3. My common factor is x plus 3, so I write down x plus 3. And then my other grouping, we're going to group this together. So I would get 2x plus 1. All right? Okay, so in this live stream, we went over factoring, we went over um, factor by slide and divide, and we also went over at the end, we went over factor by grouping. So I hope this video was helpful for you in the live stream, and then I will upload this to my Twitter. So I want to thank everybody for watching, so please subscribe. All right, have a great night.